A Mr. Creepycore original creepypasta. I want to start by saying I know how this is going to sound. I've read enough of these stories myself, late at night with the lights off like an idiot, to know exactly what you're thinking right now. You're thinking I miscounted. You're thinking I forgot where I left something and built a story around my own bad memory. I used to think that about every person who ever posted something like this too. I was a skeptic. I was the guy in the comments asking why nobody just set up a camera. So believe me when I tell you, I set up the camera. I did everything right. And I still don't have an answer that lets me sleep at night, because last night the camera caught something, and this morning, for the first time since this started 4 months ago, the thing that had been moved was me. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter for this, so I'll just tell you I'm 29, I live alone in a 2-bedroom rental house on the edge of a mid-sized town, and up until 4 months ago my life was about as unremarkable as a life can get. I work remote in logistics coordination, which is a fancy way of saying I stare at shipping manifests for 9 hours a day. I have a cat named Pixel. I go to bed around 11, I wake up around 7, and for the first 2.5 years I lived in that house, nothing strange happened at all. I'm telling you this not to pad the story but because I need you to understand that I am not the kind of person who sees ghosts in curtains. I checked the smoke detectors are working. I don't drink. I've never had a single hallucination in my life, not even the hypnagogic kind everybody gets sometimes right before sleep. I was, by every measure, a boring and reliable narrator of my own existence. That matters, because everything that happened after depended on me being exactly boring and reliable enough to notice when something wasn't. It started with a coffee mug. I have this ceramic mug, dark green, chipped on the handle, that I've used every single morning for 4 years. It lives on the second shelf from the top in my kitchen cabinet, on the left side, handle facing out, because that's how you take a mug off a shelf without fumbling it. One Tuesday morning in April, I opened the cabinet and the mug was on the right side of the shelf. Handle facing in. I want to be honest with you about how little this bothered me at first. Objectively, nothing. I have a life. I have a job. I assumed I'd put it away distracted the night before, maybe while thinking about something else, and grabbed it without noticing the position was wrong. I made my coffee. I went about my day. I didn't think about it again until the next morning, when I opened the cabinet and the mug was back on the left side, handle facing out, exactly where it always lived. That's the part that got me. Not that it had moved. That it had moved back. I told myself I was misremembering. Maybe I'd nudged it myself and forgotten. Memory is a slippery thing, especially for something as automatic as putting away a mug you've handled 10,000 times. I decided not to think about it, and for about a week, I mostly didn't. Then it happened again, except this time it wasn't the mug. It was my shoes. I keep my running shoes by the front door, laces tucked in, toes pointing toward the door so I can step into them without looking. I came downstairs one morning and they were turned 180 degrees, toes pointing back into the house, laces hanging loose over the sides like someone had picked them up, examined them, and set them back down without bothering to arrange them the way I do. I stood there in my socks looking at those shoes for longer than I want to admit. Then, because I am who I am, I found a reason. I decided Pixel must have knocked into them overnight. Cats do weird things. I turned the shoes back around and had breakfast and told myself that was that. Except 2 days later it was the remote control, sitting on the far arm of the couch instead of the coffee table where it always lives. The day after that, a single kitchen knife, out of the block, laid flat on the cutting board, blade pointing toward the window. That one I did not sleep well after. But I still didn't have a name for what was happening. I still didn't believe, not really, that anything was happening to me. I believed I was becoming forgetful, or stressed, or possibly losing sleep in a way that was affecting my memory during the day. I looked it up. I read about how the brain fills in gaps in routine tasks, how you can perform an action 1,000 times identically and then, on the 1,001st time, do it slightly differently while your conscious mind insists you did it the same as always. I read that human attention is far more limited than we like to believe, that people fail to register enormous changes happening directly in front of them if their focus is elsewhere in the moment. I told myself this was that. A blind spot. A gap in my own perception that I was filling with a story, because a story is more satisfying than admitting your brain sometimes just misfires. I want to be fair to that explanation, because for a while, it held. It's a real phenomenon, and I don't think everyone who thinks something is watching their house is right. But there's a difference between failing to notice a change happening in front of you and finding a consistent, repeated, deliberate feeling alteration every single morning for weeks, always exactly one thing, always small enough to seem plausible and specific enough to feel intentional. Around week 3, I stopped calling it forgetfulness in my head and started calling it, quietly, without saying it out loud to anyone, a pattern. Because that's what it was. Every single night, exactly one object in my house was moved. Never two things. Never zero. One thing, moved somewhere close to its original spot but never in it, every single night, no matter what I did. I started documenting it. I want you to understand this wasn't paranoia, or at least it didn't feel like paranoia from the inside. It felt like due diligence. I bought a cheap notebook and started a log, date, object, original position, new position. I photographed my kitchen counter, my nightstand, my bookshelf, every night before bed, so I'd have something to compare against in the morning. This is where things stopped being explainable by ordinary forgetfulness, because the photographs didn't lie the way memory can. I had proof, time-stamped, that on Thursday night my alarm clock was facing my bed, and on Friday morning it was facing the wall, close enough to its original position that if I hadn't taken the picture I might have missed it, but different. Always different. Always small. Always exactly one thing. I did what anyone would eventually do. I set up a camera. It was an old baby monitor camera I found in a box in the closet, left behind by a previous tenant along with some other junk I never bothered to throw out. It had night vision and it plugged into an app on my phone, and I aimed it at the kitchen counter, since that was where the disturbances seemed to cluster most. I went to bed that night feeling, for the first time in weeks, like I had the upper hand. Whatever was happening, whether it was me sleepwalking, or some environmental thing I hadn't considered, or something else I wasn't ready to name yet, I was finally going to see it. In the morning, the mug had moved again. Same shelf, same small displacement, handle turned a few degrees off from where I'd left it. I opened the app with my coffee already forgotten, heart going harder than it should for something this mundane, and scrubbed through 8 hours of night vision footage. Nothing. Not static, not a glitch, not a gap in the recording. The footage was continuous, unbroken, time-stamped every second, and it showed my kitchen counter perfectly still for 8 straight hours, right up until the exact moment I walked into frame that morning to make coffee. The mug was in the wrong position in the very first frame the camera captured after I set it up, before I'd even gone to bed. Which meant either the mug had already been moved before I started recording, in a house I'd been in all evening, without me touching it or noticing anyone else touch it. Or something had found a way to be in my kitchen, adjust an object by a few degrees, and leave, without a single frame of footage showing it. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake with my door open, listening, and heard nothing. In the morning, a picture frame in my hallway, the one of my parents at their anniversary dinner, had been rotated maybe 5 degrees clockwise on its nail. The camera, still running, still pointed at the kitchen where nothing had happened that night, had captured 8 more hours of perfect stillness and absolutely no explanation for a disturbance 3 rooms away. That was when I stopped trying to catch it directly and started trying to understand it instead. I want to tell you about the pattern I found, because I think it matters, and because it's the part of this that still keeps me up more than the moving itself. I went back through my notebook, my photographs, everything I'd logged over those first several weeks, and I started plotting the positions. Not just what moved, but exactly how far, and in what direction, relative to where it had originally been. Every single object had moved closer to true center. Not center of the room, exactly, but something more specific than that, something I only understood once I got out a tape measure and did the math properly one exhausted Sunday afternoon with graph paper spread across my kitchen table like a crime board in a movie. Every object that had ever been moved, when you plotted its displacement as a vector, pointed toward the same location. A spot in my house I had never given a second thought to. The exact geometric center of the floor plan, if you drew a rectangle around the whole structure and found its middle. Not a room. Not a piece of furniture. Just a point in space that happened to fall, as it turned out, almost precisely in the wall between my bedroom closet and the hallway linen closet on the other side. I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like I was seeing patterns because I wanted to see patterns, the same way people find faces in wood grain or hear voices in static. I tried to talk myself out of it. I redid the measurements twice. Both times, the vectors converged on the same point, give or take a few inches, close enough that I don't think it was coincidence, not with that many data points all agreeing. I told a friend. I'm not going to use her real name, so I'll call her Dana, and Dana is the kind of friend who believes you first and asks questions later, which is exactly what I needed at that point because I was starting to doubt my own account of my own life. She came over for a weekend, mostly, I think, to check on me as much as to see the phenomenon for herself. I set her up in the guest room, told her not to touch anything overnight, told her to just watch if she woke up. She laughed about it at first, the way you do when a friend tells you something you love them too much to call crazy to their face. In the morning, her phone charger, which she'd left on the guest room nightstand, had been moved to the floor beside the bed, cord neatly coiled, plug pointing toward the door. She hadn't touched it. She swore up and down she hadn't touched it, and I believed her, because I know what it looks like when someone is performing certainty for your benefit, and this wasn't that. She was pale over breakfast. She kept looking toward the hallway like she expected something to be standing there. That was the last time she stayed over, though we still talk. She told me, before she left, something that I haven't been able to shake since. She said it felt less like something had moved her charger and more like something had picked it up to look at it, decided it belonged somewhere else, and put it down with more care than she ever would have. That idea, that whatever this was had a sense of where things belonged, started to feel less like a comfort and more like the whole problem. Because here's the thing about a rule you can't break. I tried everything. I tried sleeping with all the lights on. Nothing changed except the direction of a lamp shade, turned 2 inches toward the window. I tried staying awake all night in the living room with the camera running and every door in the house propped so I'd hear the smallest creak. I fell asleep around 4 in the morning, exhausted past the point of choice, and woke up to find the corner of the rug by the front door folded back on itself, precisely, like someone had lifted it to check underneath and replaced it slightly askew. I tried locking valuable and sentimental items in a small fireproof safe I bought specifically for this purpose, my grandmother's ring, my passport, the external hard drive with every photo I own. The safe itself, 3 days later, had been rotated 45 degrees on the closet shelf where I kept it. I never got the sense anything had been taken. Only handled. Only reconsidered. Only put back down in a slightly different place, as though whatever was doing this wasn't stealing from me at all, but auditing me. Going through my life object by object, night by night, deciding where each piece belonged in some configuration only it could see, and slowly, patiently, correcting my house to match. I looked into the medical explanations, because I owed myself that much rigor before I let myself believe anything stranger. I read about delusions where people become convinced a familiar place has somehow been duplicated, existing in 2 locations at once, or subtly swapped for an identical copy without their being able to say exactly what's different. I read about the related idea, the one where a person becomes convinced someone they love has been replaced by an imposter who looks and sounds exactly right but simply isn't them anymore. Both of those are real, documented things that happen to real people, usually connected to some kind of injury or illness in the brain, and for a while I genuinely hoped that's what this was. I would have taken a diagnosis. I would have taken medication and a specialist and a name for a condition over what I actually started to suspect, which was that nothing was wrong with my brain at all, and that the problem was external, patient, and still going. Because none of those conditions explain time-stamped camera footage showing an empty room before and after a change with no gap in between. None of those conditions explain a friend's charger moving in a house that isn't hers, witnessed by someone whose brain has nothing wrong with it. I wasn't misremembering my own life. Something else was rearranging it, and whatever it was, it wanted my house arranged around a single point I couldn't see or reach, somewhere inside the wall between 2 closets that, as far as I could tell, contained nothing but wiring and insulation and the dark, ordinary space between one room and the next. I want to tell you about the night before this morning now, because that's the part one actually sat down to write about, and everything before this was just so you'd understand why what happened makes sense to me, even though I know it won't make sense to you. For months into this, I'd more or less adapted. You can get used to almost anything if it happens slowly enough and never actually hurts you. I still logged the changes. I still checked the camera every morning out of habit more than hope, since it had never once caught anything directly, no matter where I aimed it. Last night I went to bed at my normal time, 11 o'clock, after taking my usual photos of the kitchen and hallway, after propping the camera on the counter facing the room like I'd done nearly every night for months. Pixel slept at the foot of the bed like always. I fell asleep without much trouble, which in itself I should have taken as a warning, because normally that house made me anxious enough that sleep took a while to come. Last night it didn't. It came fast, and it came heavy, and if I dreamed anything I don't remember it. I woke up on the floor of my bedroom closet. Not my bed. Not the hallway, not somewhere I could explain as sleepwalking toward a door or a window, somewhere a person half asleep and confused might wander. The closet. Curled on my side on the carpet between a stack of folded sweaters and the wall, my phone still in my hand from where I must have fallen asleep scrolling, except I don't remember bringing my phone to bed and I definitely don't remember walking into the closet. The closet door was shut. I had to push it open from the inside, disoriented, my neck aching from the angle I'd apparently slept in, my heart already going hard before I'd even fully processed where I was, because some animal part of my brain understood before the rest of me did what this meant. I checked the camera footage first, hands shaking too badly to hold the phone steady. 8 hours of my kitchen counter, empty, still, exactly as I'd left it. Nothing happened in that room last night. Nothing ever happens where the camera is pointed. I understand that now, and I think I've understood it for a while without letting myself say it. It's never been about hiding from the camera. It's been about knowing, every single night, exactly where I've chosen to look, and simply not being there. I measured the distance from my bed to where I woke up in the closet. I didn't want to. I made myself do it anyway, because if I've learned one thing these past 4 months, it's that the not knowing is worse than whatever the number turns out to be. It's about 9 feet, in the direction of that same convergence point I mapped out weeks ago, the spot behind the wall between the 2 closets that every single object in this house has been slowly, patiently reoriented towards since April. I don't know what happens when I finally end up close enough to it. I don't know if that's even the right question, or if the real question is what happens when there's nothing left in this house that hasn't already been moved into its correct position, including me. I keep thinking about what Dana said, about her charger being handled with more care than she'd ever give it herself, put down like something being considered rather than stolen. I keep thinking about the mug in the wrong spot on that very first Tuesday morning, and how small it seemed, how easy it was to explain away, and how I know now that it was never really about the mug at all. It was about establishing, slowly enough that I wouldn't panic, that everything in this house, every object, every surface, every sleeping thing, was subject to the same quiet correction. It just started with the things that wouldn't scream. I called out of work today. I haven't left the house, but I also haven't been able to make myself stay in any one room for very long, because I keep catching myself standing still, staring at nothing, and I can't tell anymore whether that's exhaustion or whether it's something in me already starting to settle, the way a mug settles onto a shelf, the way a photo frame settles a few degrees off true and stays there until someone corrects it back. Tonight I'm not sleeping in my bed. I've dragged a chair into the hallway, the one spot in the house I can see 3 doors from at once, and I'm going to sit up with every light on and my phone recording, not the kitchen this time, but myself, because I think that's the only footage that would actually mean anything now. I don't expect it to catch anything. I've stopped expecting the camera to catch anything at all. I think whatever this is doesn't need to hide from a lens. I think it only needs a room to be, for a few hours, unwatched by the person inside it, and I don't know how you stay awake watching yourself for the rest of your life. If you're reading this and you live alone, or even if you don't, I want you to do something for me tonight. Before bed, take a picture of one room in your house. Any room. It doesn't matter which one. Just take the picture, and in the morning, before you do anything else, before coffee, before your phone, before your normal routine carries you past it the way routine always does, look at that picture again and really compare it. Not a glance. Really look. Because I promise you, before 4 months ago, I would have told you nothing in my house had ever moved either. I would have told you I'd have noticed. I was wrong about that, and I don't think I'm the only one who's wrong about it. I think most people are simply never looked at closely enough, by anything, to find out. I don't know what's going to be different tomorrow morning. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'll wake up in my own bed and this will just be one bad night in a long string of bad nights I've somehow survived. Or maybe I'll wake up a little closer to that wall between the closets, curled up somewhere I didn't choose to be, one more measurement closer to wherever this ends. Either way, I'm going to keep the notebook going. I'm going to keep logging it, every night, for as long as I'm the one doing the writing. I just don't know anymore how many more mornings that's going to be true.